This is the best podcasting interface you've probably never heard of. This is the Centrance Portcaster. It's an interface, recorder, and all-around good guy that is aimed at podcasters and field recorders. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. These things tend to be coveted by voiceover people as well. But we do have some awkwardness to get out of the way. This thing costs $449 US. Now, there are reasons behind this, and we're going to discuss that in a bit, but trust me, this thing may very well be worth it for your setup. I'm going to let you decide, though. Let's start with the build quality. So before we get into this, I should point out this was sent to me by my own request for a review, but I have since requested to purchase this for myself, so make of that what you will. But this thing is an actual beast. It's an all aluminum frame, and if you believe their YouTube channel, you can even run it over with a truck. This thing is built for field recording. It's meant to be set and forget, as the switches aren't the easiest to switch on the fly, but you do get a little tool for doing it in case you actually need to. The knobs are just fantastic. They're not easy to accidentally bump out of place. They're very smooth, and they just feel premium. The XLR connectors are Neutrix, and the connections all feel fantastic. And all of the buttons as well, just fantastic. Now, you may notice one side is input and the other side is output. This side has the two XLRs and a mix minus phone input. And on the other side, you got all the action. Now, one big deal on this side is that you can get your audio recorded in 3 different ways, as I'm doing right now, onto a micro SD, through it and into a computer, as this is an actual interface, as well as an out to a camera, meaning those are 3 separate failsafes. Now we're going to go over how all that sounds in just a bit. It's a 1-button press to record, and I should also point out it has an ASIO driver that you can download for multi-track support on Windows. It has universal phantom, a stereo aux input, and a couple other cool things I should point out. First is that you can sum your signal to a mono signal if you need. It has a line or mic level output switch for the camera out with the 46 dB pad for DSLRs that require it. And of course, it is battery powered. Now, before we have any grumps in the chat over the internal battery, apparently these things can last for years. I did reach out to the company to see if it was in any way replaceable. I forgot to ask the second time. Long story. Check the pinned tweet if you're watching this in the future, though. I'll put down the answer down there. Now, you can get around 6 hours of recording on a single charge, and you can just run it off of mains power as well. Now, in the specs is where these things kind of fall off a cliff, because it's hard to find something this small and cute with stellar specs. Usually something has to get hacked off for size or for price. But this is 20 Hz to 20 kHz. It's 24-bit up to 192 kHz, which is amazing for sample rate. The gain is 65 dB, which is good, and an EIN of neg 127 dBUA weighted, which is also good. Also, there's an interesting spec on this that isn't normally included in interfaces, but should be, and that's crosstalk. Now, that is the level of information meant for one channel that ends up on the other channel, and it's usually measured as a ratio of the bad signal compared to the good signal that is expected. Now, if that's all over your head, the spec on this is at 1 kHz. It comes in at neg 95 dB, which is actually quite good. And here's a good time to also point out that the limiters are analog limiters / compression that offer a soft knee, which translates to it isn't going to be an abrupt sounding limiter, and it should be rather smooth. All in all, especially on a package this small, that's very much an impressive piece. So I actually don't have to do anything for this. This is the input comparison. This is going directly into the unit and into my computer and being recorded into a DAW. And this is being recorded directly to the SD. And this is the camera comparison of audio, where you actually have the preamps on the camera, possibly adding some noise. What do you think as I go between the 3 of them? Do you notice any difference between the SD and the DAW and the camera? Let me know. Wow, that was some input noise, wasn't it? Now, we have it going through the H5 from the Centrance Portcaster, and this is just to confirm that it was the actual camera input causing that noise and not the output on the Centrance. And we can confirm that through this, which is actually a relatively noisy interface at neg 121 EIN, but going through the capsule, I think it's even lower than that, and still it sounds better than that camera. So we're testing the limiter here, and we've got the limiter turned on. Now we have the SM7DB, and this has the highest amount of preamp kicking in on this microphone. So we're going to turn this up, and we're going to see what this sounds like as I start to hit that limiter and the soft knee. Now, technically, this is not a limiter. It's a compression. It's a soft knee compression that gets added to the audio, and it kind of reacts like a limiter. But some people get a little weirded out when you hear compression. But this is with the limiter kicking in, and this is what it sounds like when it's going over the SM7DB. Now, you can see, as I bring this up, it's not kicking in that much. You can just see the limiter light starting to light up, meaning it's probably not kicking in all that much. So let's turn it up a little bit more. And now you're going to be seeing the limiter actually lighting up. And even in some of the clipping, it starts to show there. So this is what it sounds like with that soft knee compression or the limiter applied to the channel. Okay, now I've got my headphones on. This is the SM7B test. My peaks right now are at about -18. We're at like 90% on the gain dial on this thing. It has 65 dB of gain on here, and we're just going to turn it up. We're going to hear what it sounds like with the SM7B. Obviously, this is a workable signal with an SM7B, but let's just hear what it sounds like as we turn this up. So that is at about as close to 99% as you're going to get. But now you're going to hear the preamps when you go that extra 1% just to take it all the way. There you go. And yes, that price tag is definitely hanging over the conversation. But as with everything else I just said, there are some considerations here. The biggest of them is, well, this is American made. And while I stand outside that bubble of American influence, the idea of a piece of gear being made in its country of origin is extremely rare and, well, rather foreign. Pun not intended. And because of that, things of that ilk are not cheap until they get up into the conversation of being mass produced. And, well, these things aren't. Remember, the hands that operate the machines that build this are paid way better than the hands that do it overseas. So if that's important to you, here you go. But let's get back to use case. Probably the best sales pitch I've heard on this is, if you need a travel kit for your audio, this thing can be both. Why have a travel kit separately when you can just pick up your daily driver and take it with you? That's the greatest appeal of something like this. A voiceover artist or podcaster doesn't need to change their sound just because they're going away. So in that respect, this isn't necessarily an expensive item when you consider the workload that you will get if you have that setup of this being your main driver as well as your on-the-road driver. Now, I talked in an earlier video about the soul of gear like this and how easy it is to spot something that was made by people who actually use the gear as well. And this is one of those products. You can tell this was designed by somebody to fill a need and a need that they had. Meaning this wasn't designed by a committee to finance a second yacht. This wasn't designed by somebody considering saving money on the product. And while they may not have mass production on their side to bring the price down, maybe this just needs people to raise them up. I mean, you can get cheaper, for sure. But price to performance, when you can't compromise on said performance, I don't think you're going to get better, especially at how small this thing is. By the way, this thing is now in my travel kit because it's a no-brainer. I want to know what you think, though. Is there something better that is cheaper? Let me know down below, especially if you got something that's smaller. It's so cute.